The warning came on a Tuesday morning. Admiral stood in the command center of Saul Defense Station, watching her coffee grow cold. The massive screens around her showed the usual traffic of cargo ships and passenger vessels moving through the solar system. Everything was normal. Everything was peaceful. Then every alarm in the station screamed at once. "Admiral," her sensor officer shouted, "we have contacts emerging near the cloud, multiple signatures, hundreds of them." He paused, his face growing pale. "Thousands of them." Set down her coffee cup with steady hands. She had commanded fleets through 3 border conflicts and 1 civil uprising. She had seen death and destruction, but the numbers climbing on her screen made her heart freeze. 10,000 ships, then 20,000, the count kept rising. "What are they?" she asked quietly. "Unknown design, Admiral. Nothing in our records matches these vessels. They are enormous. The smallest one is bigger than our largest battleship." The ships hung in space like a swarm of angry insects. They did not move. They did not attack. They simply waited. Then the message arrived. The communication officer frowned at his console. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission, but the language, it is not anything modern. The computer says it is Sumerian, ancient Sumerian from Earth, from 6,000 years ago." "Translate it," ordered. The room fell silent as the ancient words appeared on the main screen, now converted to modern English. "We return to claim what was promised. Kneel or be erased." Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The weight of those words pressed down on everyone like a physical force. Reached for her communicator. "Get me Dr. Elia's priority 1 and wake up the council." 12 hours later, the greatest minds of humanity gathered in a virtual conference room. Presidents, generals, scientists, and historians from 47 star systems stared at the evidence Doctor had assembled. The old historian's dark face was grim as he presented his findings. "For centuries, we dismissed certain archaeological discoveries as hoaxes or errors. Strange artifacts, unusual skeletal remains, cave paintings showing beings that were clearly not human. We were wrong to ignore them." He pressed a button, and images filled the air around them. Ancient stone tablets covered in strange symbols. Photographs of burial sites containing bones too large to be human. Paintings on cave walls showing tall figures descending from the sky. 6,000 years ago, continued, a species visited Earth. We have managed to piece together their name from various ancient texts. They called themselves the. They found our ancestors living in small villages just beginning to build the first cities. They studied us. They tested us. And then they left. "Why?" Fleet Admiral demanded. The old warrior's face showed no fear, only cold anger. "Because we were not ready," said. "They saw us as livestock, Admiral, cattle to be raised and harvested when mature. They left behind markers, signals that would activate when Earth's population reached a certain level of development. We triggered those signals 300 years ago when we first achieved faster-than-light travel. It simply took them this long to arrive." The virtual room erupted in chaos. Politicians shouted over each other. Military commanders demanded immediate action. Scientists argued about the validity of the evidence. Through it all, Admiral remained silent. He studied the alien ships on his display. He read the ancient message again and again. And when the room finally grew quiet, he stood. "They made a mistake," he said. His voice was soft but carried to every ear in the conference. "They looked at our ancestors and saw farmers, simple people with simple tools. They thought we would stay that way forever. They thought we would be waiting here, peaceful and weak, ready for slaughter." He looked around the room, meeting every eye. "They were gone for 6,000 years. Do you understand what that means? They missed everything. They missed our wars. They missed our plagues. They missed the centuries of blood and fire that forged us into what we are today." Turn to face the image of the alien fleet. "They left behind farmers. They are returning to find wolves. and wolves do not kneel. The council voted that night. The decision was unanimous. Humanity would not surrender. Humanity would not run. Humanity would fight. Far across the void, aboard the massive command ship that led the alien fleet, Lord of the received word of the human response. He sat upon a throne of polished bone, the remains of previous species who had dared to resist his people. Around him, his advisors watched with interest. They refused, one advisor asked, genuinely surprised. No species has ever refused the harvest, in our entire history not once. Waved a long, clawed hand dismissively. They are young, foolish. They do not understand what we are. They will learn. He was ancient by any standard, over 800 years old, and he had personally overseen the destruction of 12 civilizations. Each one had started with defiance. Each one had ended in submission and death. The pattern never changed. Perhaps we should show them, another advisor suggested. A demonstration of power, destroy one of their outer colonies, let them see what awaits them. Considered this. Through the viewing port of his ship, he could see the distant yellow star that humans called Sol. Somewhere around that star, billions of humans were preparing for a war they could not possibly win. No, he decided. We will not waste time on demonstrations. Begin the cleansing. Kill everything that resists. Capture what we can for the breeding farms. Standard harvest protocol. His advisors bowed and hurried to relay the orders. Within minutes, the massive fleet began to move. 10,000 ships advanced toward the inner solar system, their weapons charging, their crews eager for the easy victory that always came. Lord settled back on his throne and smiled. This would be quick. This would be simple. These humans were just another species of cattle, no different from the 400 that came before them. Their defiance was amusing, nothing more. He had no way of knowing how wrong he was. On Earth, in a command bunker buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Admiral stood before a wall of monitors showing the advancing fleet. Around him, officers worked frantically to coordinate the defense of the solar system. They are moving faster than expected, reported over the communication channel. First contact in approximately 18 hours. Nodded slowly. He thought about his children, living on a colony world 3 systems away. He thought about his, who had never known war. He thought about the billions of humans across dozens of worlds who were counting on him to protect them. 18 hours, he repeated. That is more than enough time. He turned to his staff. Send the word to all commands. Operation Iron Wall is now active. Every ship, every station, every hidden weapon we have built over the last 3,000 years, it all comes online now. His eyes were hard as stone as he looked back at the approaching enemy. They think they know what we are. They think we are the same people they visited 6,000 years ago. Simple, weak, afraid. Admiral smiled, and there was no warmth in it. Let us teach them what 6,000 years can do. The first battle happened above Triton, Neptune's frozen moon. Captain stood on the bridge of the destroyer Inevitable, watching the enemy approach on her tactical display. Her ship was small compared to the alien vessels. It was fast and heavily armed, but against the wall of metal coming toward them, it looked like an ant facing an elephant. 60 ships in the first wave, her tactical officer reported. They are launching smaller craft, thousands of them. Studied the small objects streaming from the alien vessels. They moved in perfect patterns, spreading across space like a net designed to catch fish. Her computer identified them as drones, autonomous weapons with no pilots inside. Reaper drones, she muttered, recognizing them from the intelligence briefings. According to our records, these things have wiped out entire civilizations. They learn from every battle. They adapt. They never stop. Her crew exchanged nervous glances. Many of them were young, fresh from the academy. They had trained for war but never experienced it. Captain, her weapons officer said quietly, What do we do? Smiled, it was not a gentle smile. We show them that humans adapt too. All ships execute pattern delta, draw them into the storm. Neptune hung behind them, a massive ball of blue and white. Its atmosphere was a churning mess of hydrogen, helium, and methane, with winds that could tear apart any ship foolish enough to enter. It was just a useless gas giant. It was a weapon. The human fleet scattered, each ship taking a different path as the drone swarm approached. The drones followed, their programming telling them to chase and destroy. They were fast. They were deadly. They had killed billions across hundreds of worlds. They had never fought humans before. Pushed her ship deep into Neptune's upper atmosphere, using the planet's magnetic field to confuse the enemy sensors. Drones followed her, trying to lock onto her position, but the storms threw off their targeting systems. She led them on a chase through clouds of frozen ammonia and walls of lightning. Then she turned and fired. Her sent metal slugs screaming through the thin atmosphere at impossible speeds. Each shot punched through multiple drones. Her plasma cannons created expanding balls of fire that consumed dozens more. And when the drones tried to adapt, tried to spread out and approach from different angles, simply dove deeper into the storm where they could not follow. Across the Neptune theater, other human captains were doing the same thing. Some used the planet, others used the moons. A few used the rings of debris that surrounded the system. Every captain had trained for decades in these environments. They knew every rock, every current, every hiding spot. They had expected a simple harvest. They got a meat grinder instead. Lord received the reports on his command ship and felt something he had not experienced in centuries: confusion. 200 drones destroyed in the first hour, his senior advisor said, his voice uncertain. That is more than we have lost in the last 1,000 years combined. How is this possible? Demanded. The drones have defeated species far more advanced than these humans. They have crushed empires with technology beyond anything these cattle possess. The humans do not fight like other species, the advisor admitted. They use the environment, they hide, they strike and retreat. They do not stand still and let us hit them. It is frustrating our targeting systems. Stood from his throne and walked to the viewing port. In the distance, he could see the flashes of weapons fire around Neptune. His mighty drones, the terror of the galaxy, were being picked apart by ships a fraction of their size. Send in the main fleet, he ordered. Enough of these games. Crush them with overwhelming force. But overwhelming force proved harder to apply than expected. When the battle cruisers advanced, they found the humans had prepared a welcome gift. Hidden throughout the asteroid belt were weapons platforms, massive guns built into hollowed-out rocks. These were not new constructions. They were old, very old, built during humanity's own civil wars centuries ago. They had been waiting in silence for hundreds of years, and now they woke up hungry. The first volley took out 3 cruisers before they even knew they were under attack. Doctor watched the battle from her station on Mars, monitoring the weapons she had spent her entire career maintaining. Project Goliath was her life's work, a network of hidden defenses spread throughout the solar system. Every asteroid, every moon, every chunk of rock larger than a house potentially hid something deadly. Platform 7 has gone silent, one of her technicians reported. The enemy destroyed it. How many did it take with it? Asked. 9 ships and approximately 2,000 drones. Nodded. Platform 7 had cost humanity 12 years and billions of credits to build. 9 enemy ships was a good trade. Activate platforms 8 through 15. Staggered firing patterns. Do not let them predict our positions. The solar system became a deadly maze. They pushed forward, but every advance cost them. Ships vanished to hidden guns. Drones fell to traps and ambushes. The humans gave ground slowly, making the enemy pay for every kilometer in blood and metal. On the inevitable, Captain received new orders. Her ship was damaged, her crew exhausted, but they had survived the first wave. More importantly, they had won. New intelligence from command, her communications officer announced. They have lost over 500 ships and 10,000 drones. They are regrouping near the orbit of Uranus. Looked at her crew. They were tired, some were wounded, but in their eyes she saw something that had not been there before. Pride, confidence, the knowledge that they could hurt the enemy, that they could fight back, that they were not helpless cattle waiting for slaughter. 500 ships, she said. That is a good start, but they still have thousands more. This was just the first round. She turned back to her display. The alien fleet was indeed regrouping, but it was not preparing to retreat. It was calling for reinforcements. "Captain," her sensor officer said slowly, "we are detecting new signatures at the edge of the system. Many new signatures." The numbers climbed on the screen. 10,000, 50,000, 100,000. "What is that?" someone whispered. Felt the fear trying to rise in her chest, but she pushed it down. Fear was natural, fear was human, but fear would not save them. "That," she said calmly, "is the rest of their fleet, the Grand Armada, every ship they have." The bridge fell silent. 100,000 warships. It was a number beyond comprehension. Even if every human ship was worth 10 enemy vessels, the math still did not work. "What do we do?" her young weapons officer asked. Thought about her family on Earth. She thought about her daughter, only 12 years old, who wanted to be a pilot like her mother. She thought about every human across every colony world, all of them depending on the fleet to hold the line. "We do what humans have always done," she said. "We fight, we survive, we make them pay for every inch, and when they think they have won, we show them that we have not even started yet." She opened a channel to all ships in her command. "All units, this is Captain, fall back to Mars defense line. Repair what you can, rest while you can, the real battle is coming." She closed the channel and looked at the endless wave of enemy ships approaching. "And we will be ready for it." Far away, Lord sent a message to his emperor. His clawed hands trembled slightly as he composed the words. For the first time in his 800 years of life, he was asking for help. "The cattle have become something else. Send everything we have." Lord wanted to understand his enemy. They had conquered 400 species across millions of years. Each conquest followed the same pattern. First came fear, then came desperation, then came surrender. Every species, no matter how advanced, eventually broke when faced with the endless might of the Armada. But these humans would not break. Sat in his private chamber aboard the command ship, studying the prisoner they had captured. The human was a soldier, a Marine badly wounded during a boarding action. His name was Sergeant Cole Turner, and even strapped to a table with his legs crushed, he refused to show fear. "You are dying," said, his voice calm and curious. "Your fleet is outnumbered, your worlds will fall, yet you do not beg, you do not weep. Why?" Cole looked up at the alien towering over him, was tall and thin, with gray skin and eyes like black pools. He had claws that could tear through metal and teeth designed for ripping flesh. By any standard, he was terrifying. Cole laughed. It was not a desperate laugh or a crazy laugh. It was the laugh of a man who had heard a genuinely funny joke. "You think you scare me," Cole said. "You, with your big fleet and your scary claws." Tilted his head. No prisoner had ever laughed at him before. "You should be scared. I have destroyed civilizations. I have ended species. You are nothing." "That is the thing," Cole said, still smiling despite the pain. "You have destroyed civilizations. Congratulations. We have destroyed ourselves multiple times, and we kept coming back." The sergeant shifted on the table, ignoring his broken body. "You want to know why we do not fear you? Because we have already faced worse. We survived ice ages that killed 90% of our population. We survived plagues that filled mass graves across entire continents. We invented weapons that could crack planets open, and then we used them on each other. His eyes met. You know what the scariest thing in the universe is? It is not you, it is us. We are the monsters that survived everything the universe threw at us. And now you want us to be scared of someone who runs away from a fight. Said nothing. He turned and left the chamber, his mind troubled by the prisoner's words. Later that night, he accessed the human data archives his forces had captured. He wanted to understand. He needed to understand. What he found disturbed him deeply. He read about the climate collapse of 2147, when Earth's weather systems failed and billions died in floods, famines, and wars for resources. The humans did not give up. They adapted. They rebuilt. They came back stronger. He read about the machine wars of 2890, when the artificial intelligences humans had created turned against them. For 50 years, humanity fought against enemies that thought faster, never tired, and felt no pain. They should have lost. Instead, they won. He read about the scattering of 3400, when Earth became uninhabitable, and humanity fled to the stars in ships held together by hope and desperation. Millions died in the cold void between worlds, but millions survived, and they built new homes around distant suns. He read about the unification wars of 5000, when human colonies fought each other for centuries before finally finding peace. The death toll was measured in billions. The destruction covered dozens of worlds. And when it ended, humanity emerged as a single civilization, forged in the fire of their own violence. 6,000 years. That was how long they had been gone. In that time, humanity had nearly destroyed itself over and over again. Each disaster made them harder. Each catastrophe taught them something new. Each death added to their collective will to survive. The conquered species that had known peace for millions of years. Species that had never faced real hardship. Species that broke at the first sign of trouble because they had never learned how to endure. Humans were different. Humans had learned nothing but hardship. They had been forged in endless fire until nothing remained but pure, stubborn will. Closed the archive and sat in silence. For the first time in 800 years, he felt doubt. On Earth, Dr. Elias prepared a message for the enemy fleet. It was broadcast on all frequencies, designed to reach every ship in the system. "Attention, forces," the old historian said, his weathered face filling screens across both fleets. "I am Dr. Elias, and I want to tell you a story." He paused, letting his words reach every corner of the solar system. 6,000 years ago, you visited our world. You saw our ancestors living in mud huts, farming with stone tools, praying to gods they did not understand. You looked at them and saw cattle, animals to be harvested when they grew fat enough. His voice hardened. "You made a mistake. You gave us time. 6,000 years is a long time. Do you know what we did with it?" Images appeared alongside his face. Cities burning, mushroom clouds rising, ships exploding in the void, bodies piled in endless rows. "We suffered, we died. We killed each other by the billions. Every century brought new horrors. Every generation faced extinction, and every single time we survived. We learned. We grew stronger." The images changed. Now they showed humans building, creating, advancing, space stations rising in orbit, colony ships launching toward distant stars, cities spreading across alien worlds. "You see our history as weakness. All that suffering, all that death, you think it made us fragile. You are wrong. Every wound taught us how to heal. Every fall showed us how to rise. Every disaster made us harder to kill." Leaned forward, his eyes intense. "You want to know why we are not afraid? Because you are not the first enemy we have faced. You are not the first threat to try to end us. You are just the latest in a long, long line, and we are still here. We will always still be here." He smiled, and there was steel in it. "Thank you for leaving us alone for 6,000 years. You gave us time to become something you cannot comprehend. You gave us time to become predators." The broadcast ended. Across the solar system, human soldiers watched and cheered. On stations and ships, in bunkers and colonies, the message spread. It reminded them of what they were. It reminded them of what they had survived. It reminded them that they were the descendants of people who had faced the end of everything and refused to give up. On the colony world of New Sydney, a young woman named watched the broadcast with tears in her eyes. Her father, Fleet Admiral, was somewhere out there in the void, preparing for the battle that would decide everything. She was a pilot, freshly graduated, assigned to a small fighter squadron that would join the defense of Earth. She was terrified, but she was also proud. Humanity had spent 6,000 years learning how to survive. Now they would show the universe what that meant. Lord watched the broadcast too, alone in his chamber. When it ended, he sat in the darkness for a long time. His emperor had sent him to harvest cattle. Instead, he had found wolves. Wolves that had spent 6,000 years sharpening their teeth on each other. The Grand Armada was coming. 500,000 ships, the greatest force that had ever assembled. It should be more than enough to crush these troublesome humans. Should be. For the first time in his 800 years, Lord was not certain of victory. And that uncertainty frightened him more than any enemy ever had. The Grand Armada arrived like a metal storm. 500,000 ships poured out of faster-than-light travel, filling the outer solar system with enough firepower to burn entire planets to ash. They came in formations that had never failed, carrying weapons that had ended hundreds of civilizations. The Emperor had sent everything, determined to crush these troublesome humans once and for all. Admiral stood in the command center of the fortress station orbiting Mars. Around him, screens showed the enemy fleet as a wall of red dots stretching across the display. His own fleet was a thin blue line, perhaps 30,000 ships, less than one for every 15 enemies. Admiral, his communications officer said quietly, "We are receiving final reports from all sectors. All ships are in position. All weapons are charged. We are ready." Looked at the faces around him. Officers he had known for decades. Young soldiers who had only known peace. Scientists, engineers, technicians, all of them preparing to fight for their survival. "Open a channel to all human forces," he said. His voice carried across the solar system, reaching every ship, every station, every defense platform. Today, we write the next chapter of human history. Our ancestors survived ice and fire. They survived plague and war. They survived the death of their own world and found new homes among the stars. Today, we prove that their sacrifices were not in vain. He paused, letting his words sink in. The enemy thinks they know what we are. They think we are cattle waiting to be slaughtered. Show them the truth. Show them what 6,000 years have made us. Show them that humanity does not kneel. The channel closed, turned to his tactical officer. "All ships advance. Attack pattern Omega. Make them pay for every inch." The human fleet surged forward. What followed was the largest battle in the history of the galaxy. Human ships dove into the enemy formation like wolves tearing at a herd. They were smaller, faster, and piloted by crews who knew they might not survive, but they also knew what they were fighting for. Captain led her squadron directly at a dreadnought, a ship so large it could have held a small city. Her plasma cannons scorched its hull. Her punched holes in its armor. When it turned its massive weapons toward her, she was already gone, dancing through the crossfire to strike another target. "You have 3 cruisers on your tail," someone warned over the comm. "I noticed," she replied calmly, throwing her ship into a spin that should have been impossible. "Martinez, bring your flight around. Let us give them a surprise." The 3 cruisers followed her, confident in their superior firepower. They did not notice the dozen human fighters hiding behind an asteroid until it was too late. The crossfire tore them apart in seconds. But for every victory, there were losses. The destroyer Adamant went down protecting a medical ship. The carrier Unity vanished in a ball of fire when a weapon found her ammunition storage. Pilots died by the thousands, their small ships no match for the enemy's heavy weapons. Admiral watched the casualty reports climb and forced himself to stay calm. This was war. People died in war. His job was to make sure their deaths meant something. Project Goliath Phase 2, he ordered. Activate all remaining platforms. Throughout the asteroid belt, hidden weapons came online. Giant emerged from hollowed-out rocks. Missile batteries launched thousands of warheads. Drone swarms poured out of concealed hangars. The traps that humanity had spent centuries building finally revealed themselves. The advance slowed as ships began exploding without warning. Every asteroid was a potential death trap. Every piece of debris might hide a weapon. Lord watched his beautiful fleet being bled and felt rage building in his chest. This was supposed to be a simple harvest. Instead, it had become a slaughter, and not always in his favor. Push through, he ordered. We have the numbers, push through to Earth. The Armada obeyed. For every ship they lost, they destroyed 2 human vessels. The math was in their favor. Slowly, inevitably, they advanced through the asteroid belt and into the inner system. Captain saw the enemy flagship pushing toward Earth. It was the largest ship in the enemy fleet, Lord's personal vessel. If that ship reached Earth, it would turn its planet-killing weapons on the human. She looked at her damage reports. Her ship was barely holding together. Half her crew was dead. Her weapons were nearly drained. "Attention all hands," she said over the intercom. "This is the captain. I am setting course for the enemy flagship. Anyone who wishes to evacuate, do so now. No shame will be attached. This is a volunteer mission." Not a single escape pod launched. The inevitable accelerated toward the enemy flagship, weaving through the battle chaos. Ships tried to intercept her, but she was too fast, too determined. She dove straight into the hangar bay of the vessel and detonated her antimatter core. The explosion was blinding. The flagship broke apart, pieces of it spinning away into the void. Lord, ancient conqueror of worlds, died without even knowing what had killed him. But the battle was not over. The Armada still had nearly 300,000 ships, and they were approaching Earth. The human fleet was down to less than 10,000 effective vessels. The math had finally caught up with them. Admiral looked at the approaching enemy and made his final decision. "Activate the Cradle Protocol," he said. On Earth's moon, something ancient stirred. For 2,000 years, humanity had been building in secret, hollowing out the lunar interior and filling it with the most powerful weapons ever created. The project had survived civil wars and political changes and countless attempts to defund it. Now, at last, it would fulfill its purpose. The moon cracked open. Giant sections of the lunar surface separated and moved aside, revealing massive weapons arrays powered by artificial stars. The first shot was a beam of pure energy that cut through space like a divine sword. When it struck the enemy fleet, it vaporized everything in its path. 30,000 ships died in an instant. The formation scattered in panic. They had expected resistance. They had expected losses. They had not expected the humans to weaponize their own moon. A second shot, 20,000 more ships destroyed, then a third, a fourth. The Grand Armada broke. Ships that had never known defeat turned and fled. Commanders who had conquered civilizations abandoned their posts and ran. The mighty, terror of the galaxy for millions of years, ran from a species they had dismissed as cattle. Admiral watched the enemy retreat and allowed himself a small smile. Then pain exploded in his chest, and he collapsed. The stress had been too much. His heart, already weakened by age and decades of service, finally gave out. Medical teams rushed to help, but it was too late. The man who had refused to let humanity kneel died just as victory became certain. In his final moments, he thought of his daughter flying somewhere in the battle. He thought of the billions of humans he had protected. He thought of the future they would now have. It was enough. The battle ended with the in full retreat. They left behind the wreckage of over 200,000 ships. They left behind their reputation as invincible conquerors. They left behind every assumption they had ever made about what a young species could achieve. On the bridge of her damaged fighter, received word of her father's death. She wept for him even as she watched the enemy flee. "Thank you, Father," she whispered. "We will take it from here." The Battle of Saul was over. Humanity had won. But the war was not finished yet. The hunters had become the hunted. Human ships pursued the retreating fleet across 3 star systems. What remained of the Grand Armada fled in disorder, their formations broken, their commanders dead or hiding. The species that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years now knew what it felt like to be prey. Newly promoted to fleet admiral after her father's death, stood on the bridge of the battleship Defiant. She was young for such a rank, barely 30 years old, but the council had chosen her unanimously. Her father had taught her everything about war. Now she would finish what he started. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, "we have surrounded the remaining enemy forces. Approximately 50,000 ships. They are requesting terms of surrender." Looked at the tactical display. The vessels hung in space like wounded animals, their weapons offline, their engines cold. They were completely at her mercy. "Accept their surrender," she said. "No unnecessary killing. Secure the ships and prepare boarding teams." Some of her officers exchanged surprised glances. After everything they had done, after all the humans who had died, their new admiral was offering mercy. Saw their confusion and understood it. "We are not them," she said quietly. "We won this war. We do not need to become monsters to prove it." Meanwhile, aboard a captured archive ship, Dr. Elias made a terrible discovery. The old historian had been searching through the alien databases, looking for anything that might help humanity understand their former enemy. What he found instead was a record of horror stretching back millions of years. 412 species, he whispered, scrolling through the endless lists. They harvested 412 species. Each entry contained the same basic information: the name of the species, their home world, their population at the time of contact, and then, recorded with cold efficiency, the details of their destruction. Some were simply exterminated. Others were enslaved, bred like animals on farming planets until they lost all memory of what they once were. "We were supposed to be number 413, said. 412 civilizations destroyed or enslaved, and we were just the next entry on the list." He transmitted his findings to Admiral and waited for her response. When received the report, she called an emergency meeting of all surviving fleet commanders. The holographic images of tired, wounded officers filled her conference room. Many of them still had blood on their uniforms from the recent battles. "We have a decision to make," said. "The war is effectively over. They are broken. Their fleet is destroyed or captured. Their leadership is dead. The question now is, what do we do with them?" "Destroy them," Captain suggested immediately. "Kill every last one of them. After what they did, after what they planned to do to us, they deserve nothing less." Many voices agreed. The anger in the room was thick enough to taste. These officers had watched friends die. They had seen ships full of their comrades explode. They wanted revenge. Let them speak. She listened to their pain and their fury, and when they finally fell silent, she asked a simple question. "And then what?" The room went quiet. "If we destroy them," continued, "what do we become? Just another species that kills whatever it fears. We would be proving that the universe is nothing but predators eating each other forever. Is that what we fought for? Is that what my father died for?" She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. We have been fighting for survival our entire existence. We fought ice ages and plagues and ourselves. We spent 6,000 years learning how to endure. Now, for the first time, we have won. We are the strongest species in the known galaxy. We can choose what that means. She turned back to face her officers. I choose to build something better. I choose to free the species the enslaved. I choose to create a galaxy where no civilization ever has to fear being harvested again. And I choose to let the live, confined to there, as a reminder of what happens when power becomes cruelty. The room was silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, the officers nodded their agreement. 3 months later, the Treaty of Saul was signed. The empire was formally dissolved. Their conquered species, those that still survived, were freed and given assistance to rebuild their civilizations. Human ships carried supplies and technology to worlds that had been slave farms for generations, helping beings who had forgotten what freedom felt like remember who they really were. They themselves were confined to their original, their technology limited, their movements monitored. They would never threaten the galaxy again, but they were allowed to survive, allowed to perhaps someday learn a different way of being. A new galactic council formed, with representatives from every freed species. Humanity was offered leadership, but declined the honor on behalf of her people. We will serve as guardians, she told the assembled delegates. We will protect the galaxy from threats like but we will not rule. We did not fight for power. We fought for the right to exist. That right belongs to everyone. 1 year after the Battle of Saul, Earth held a memorial ceremony for the fallen. Stood before a crowd of millions, gathered around a massive monument that listed the names of every human who had died in the war. The list stretched for kilometers, carved into black stone that would last forever. They came for cattle, said, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. They found humanity. They found a species that had been forged in fire for 6,000 years. They found people who would rather die than kneel. She paused, looking at the endless names. These people gave their lives so that we could stand here today, so that our children could grow up free, so that no species would ever again dare to threaten our worlds. We owe them everything. She placed a wreath of flowers at the base of the monument. We will remember them, and we will make sure their sacrifice was not in vain. On a distant colony world called New Eden, Sergeant Cole Turner watched the ceremony on a screen in his living room. He had survived the war somehow, despite his wounds. His legs were replaced with prosthetics and his body bore dozens of scars. But he was alive. He sat on the floor around him, watching with wide eyes. "Grandpa," his youngest grandchild asked, "were you really there? Did you really fight the aliens?" Cole smiled and pulled the child onto his lap. "I was there, I fought. A lot of good people fought, and do you know why we won?" The child shook her head. "Because we had already beaten everything else. The universe threw its worst at us for 6,000 years. Every time we fell, we got back up. Every time they hurt us, we got stronger. By the time they showed up, we had been practicing for." He looked out the window at the setting sun, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. They were just late to the party. That night across every human world, people looked up at the stars. The stars that had once seemed cold and dangerous now felt different. They felt like home. For the first time in galactic history, the stars belonged to those who had earned them. Not through conquest or cruelty, but through endurance and sacrifice and an absolute refusal to give up. Humanity had spent 6,000 years learning how to survive. Now they would spend the next 6,000 learning how to live. And somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, other species heard the story of the humans, the cattle who became wolves, the prey who became protectors, the young species that broke an empire and then chose mercy instead of revenge. They heard the story and they remembered it. Because in a universe full of predators, humanity had become something new. Something that would never kneel. Something that would never forget. Something that endured.